The cafe was small and cozy, with warm lights that made the wooden tables shine softly. It was the kind of place where people came not just for coffee, but to sit quietly, read, or have a conversation. The aroma of freshly baked bread mixed with the smell of strong coffee, creating a feeling of comfort. Behind the counter, the server moved quickly, balancing plates and cups, greeting regulars with a smile, and taking care of every order with care. The cafe had always been busy, but for this server, it was just part of the daily routine. They moved with efficiency, but their eyes often wandered to the corner of the room where an old piano stood, its black surface slightly worn, keys showing signs of years of playing. Nobody ever touched it anymore, and it sat quietly, like a forgotten secret. The server's day started early, opening the cafe before the sun had fully risen. The first customers trickled in, some ordering the usual morning coffee, others picking up pastries to go. The server moved from table to table, smiling politely, carrying trays filled with steaming mugs and plates. There was a rhythm to it, a dance of sorts, and the server knew it well. Each order, each customer was a small task, a small responsibility, but it was tiring work. Still, the server liked the quiet moments, the pauses when there was nothing to do but wipe down a counter and glance at the piano in the corner. When the cafe was quieter, the server often thought about music. They had grown up with a love for the piano, spending hours practicing in secret. At home, the piano had been a sanctuary, a place to express feelings that were hard to say out loud. Nobody in the cafe knew about this talent. To them, the server was just friendly, hardworking, and always rushing from one task to another. The thought of playing in front of people, even for a small moment, was both exciting and terrifying. Still, it was a dream that had lingered quietly for years. The day moved on. Customers came and went, the bell above the door jingling each time. The server remembered each regular, knew their usual orders, and sometimes even remembered small details about their lives. There was a sense of connection in these simple interactions, a comfort in knowing that they were part of the daily rhythm of the cafe. But the piano in the corner was always there, waiting silently, like it was inviting the server to come closer. It was a Friday afternoon when the moment came. The cafe had planned a small event, nothing grand, just a few people gathered for a casual evening with some background music. The owner asked if the server would be willing to play the piano, thinking it might add a little charm to the gathering. The server froze for a moment, surprised and nervous. They had never played for anyone in the cafe before, not even a single customer. The thought of performing in front of people made their heart race, but there was also a spark of excitement. After a brief pause, the server agreed, feeling a mix of fear and anticipation. As the guests began to arrive, the server took a deep breath and walked toward the piano. The wood felt smooth under their hands as they adjusted the bench and sat down. The keys looked familiar, yet somehow different when facing an audience. They could hear the quiet murmur of conversations, the clinking of cups, and the occasional laughter from a table nearby. The server's fingers hovered over the keys, unsure at first, but ready to begin. They thought about all those hours of practice, the late nights spent perfecting simple melodies, and found a small confidence growing inside. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant. There was a moment of silence as everyone in the cafe realized that the music was starting. Some people looked up from their drinks, curious. Others stopped talking, listening intently. The sound was gentle, imperfect at first, but it carried emotion, a sincerity that caught the attention of everyone in the room. The server's nerves began to fade as the music filled the space, creating a calm, warm atmosphere. Patrons smiled, some even leaning forward slightly, surprised at the beauty coming from the old piano. As the server continued to play, the melody became more confident. Fingers moved faster, more fluidly, finding patterns that were practiced but never shared. The music seemed to tell a story, a mixture of hope, longing, and joy. The audience responded subtly at first, nodding their heads, tapping their fingers on the tables. It was as if the cafe itself had transformed, becoming a small concert hall, intimate and alive. The server felt a sense of freedom, the kind that only comes when doing something deeply personal, something that truly matters. A few people whispered to each other, surprised that the server, someone they saw daily serving coffee, could play so beautifully. Some even admitted to themselves that they had never expected to hear such talent here. The music carried through the room, soft and strong at the same time, touching each person in a quiet, profound way. The server felt a mix of emotions, joy, relief, and a little disbelief that they were finally sharing this part of themselves with the world. The song ended, and for a moment, there was silence. Then came soft clapping, growing louder as more people joined in. The server looked up, heart pounding, seeing the astonishment and delight on the faces around them. There were smiles, nods, and a few who seemed almost stunned. The old piano in the corner had become a bridge between the server and the audience, a connection that went beyond words. The server felt a warmth in their chest, a confirmation that this was where they belonged, even if only for a few minutes. The rest of the evening continued with smaller pieces, each one bringing a new layer of confidence. The audience remained engaged, some sitting quietly with a thoughtful expression, others whispering their admiration to the people next to them. The server noticed the way people's attention shifted entirely to the music, how conversations paused, how eyes followed the hands on the keys. It was a magical feeling, a moment where ordinary life and extraordinary talent intersected. After the event, the server returned to their usual duties, carrying plates and refilling cups, but now with a different feeling. Patrons came over to compliment them, some asking questions about their music background, others simply expressing how much they had enjoyed the performance. The server listened, a little overwhelmed but happy, realizing that something small had made a big difference. The piano in the corner no longer seemed forgotten. It had become a symbol of hidden possibilities, a reminder that talent could appear in the most unexpected places. As the cafe quieted down for the night, the server sat alone for a moment, hands resting on the keys, reflecting on what had happened. The fear had been replaced by a quiet satisfaction, a sense of achievement. They thought about the journey, hours of private practice, moments of doubt, the courage it took to finally play in front of people. The experience had changed them, even if just a little, and they knew that it was the beginning of something more. Perhaps there would be more performances, more opportunities to share music, or perhaps it would remain a rare moment. Either way, the connection made that night would stay with them forever. The cafe lights dimmed, and the server took a last glance at the piano. It had witnessed their fear, their courage, and their music. The keys seemed to shine softly in the warm light, waiting for the next time someone would dare to play. And in that moment, the server understood something important, that even ordinary people can create extraordinary moments, and sometimes all it takes is the courage to try. The quiet of the cafe held a promise, a reminder that behind every familiar face, there might be a hidden story waiting to be discovered. And for the server, that story had just begun. The next day, the cafe opened as usual. The morning sun spilled through the windows, casting a warm glow over the tables and the old piano in the corner. The server arrived early, their minds still replaying the events of the previous evening. It felt strange to have their music shared with others, even if only in a small way. Customers came in, greeted with the same smiles, orders taken and delivered with care. Yet, there was something different in the air. A few people had already heard about the impromptu performance, and some looked at the server with a mix of curiosity and excitement. Even though the server tried to act normal, they could feel a new sense of attention, subtle but undeniable. The cafe was busier than usual that morning. A group of regulars had come early, chatting and laughing, and one of them leaned over the counter to ask about the piano. "Is it true you played last night?" the customer asked, eyes wide. The server nodded shyly, brushing off the praise with a simple, "Yes, just a little." Inside, their heart raced. The simple act of acknowledgement felt both thrilling and scary. They poured coffee and served pastries, but their mind wandered to the piano again, imagining how it would feel to play in front of people once more. By late afternoon, the cafe began to fill with a crowd gathered for the next small event. It was informal, meant to create a cozy atmosphere with music for anyone who wanted to stay and enjoy. The server was asked again if they would play, And this time there was no hesitation. The nerves were still there, but they had been replaced with a quiet determination. It was no longer about fear, but about sharing something personal and beautiful. The server adjusted the bench, sitting in front of the piano, taking a deep breath, feeling the familiar texture of the keys beneath their fingers. As the first notes were played, the room grew quiet. Conversations faded into the background, and the sound of the piano filled the space, soft at first, then gradually stronger. The server had learned to control their nerves, letting the music speak instead of worrying about the audience. Fingers moved smoothly, practicing melodies that had been kept private for so long. Every note carried emotion, a mixture of joy, longing, and hope. Patrons leaned forward, eyes fixed on the server, as if they had never really seen them before. There was a new respect in the room, a recognition that talent often comes from unexpected places. Some customers whispered to each other, sharing their surprise. Others simply listened, lost in the music. The server noticed small reactions, the way someone's hand trembled slightly as they held a cup of coffee, or how a young woman smiled softly, clearly moved by the melody. Even those who had come in to chat or work quietly set aside their tasks, drawn into the magic of the performance. It was a powerful reminder that music could connect people in ways words could not. The server felt a rush of warmth, a sense of purpose that went beyond serving tables or taking orders. This was something larger, something meaningful. Midway through the performance, the server paused for a brief moment, letting the last chord resonate. The silence that followed was almost more powerful than the music itself. Then, slowly, the room erupted in applause. Patrons clapped and cheered, some standing to show their appreciation. The server smiled, a little overwhelmed but grateful, realizing that their music had touched the audience in a way that words could not describe. It was a shared experience, a moment that connected strangers through emotion and sound. As the evening continued, the server played a variety of pieces, each one drawing a slightly different reaction. Some songs were lively, making people tap their fingers or sway gently to the rhythm. Others were slow and reflective, creating a quiet, thoughtful atmosphere. The cafe transformed with each piece, the ordinary space becoming a small haven of music and emotion. The server's confidence grew with every note, fingers moving more freely, expressions showing the joy of creation. It was no longer just a performance, it was a conversation, a connection with everyone present. After the event, a few customers lingered to talk. They praised the server, asking about their background in music and how they had learned to play so well. The server listened politely, a little shy, but appreciated the interest. Some offered compliments, while others shared their own stories of hidden talents or dreams they had kept private. There was a sense of community forming, a feeling that the cafe was more than just a place to eat and drink. It was a space where people could share and appreciate the unexpected beauty in life. The server noticed the owner watching from behind the counter, a proud smile on their face. The small events had not only attracted more customers, but had also created a sense of warmth and engagement in the cafe. People were not just coming for coffee, they were coming to be part of something special. The server realized that this opportunity to play was not just about showing talent, but about creating moments that mattered. Each note played, each reaction from the audience, was a step toward building a connection that went beyond the ordinary routines of daily life. Later that night, after the cafe had closed and the lights were dimmed, the server sat alone at the piano. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft creaking of the floor. They ran their fingers over the keys, replaying the melodies in their mind, thinking about the faces of the audience and the emotions they had seen. There was a sense of satisfaction, a quiet joy that came from sharing something deeply personal. For the first time, the server felt that their music had a place in the world outside of their private practice at home. The events of the day stayed with the server as they walked home. They thought about the courage it had taken to play in front of others, and how that courage had opened a door to new possibilities. There was excitement for the future, but also a calm acceptance that each performance was a gift, a moment to be cherished. The piano in the corner of the cafe had become more than an object. It was a symbol of hidden potential, a reminder that even ordinary moments could hold extraordinary experiences. The next few days continued in a similar rhythm. The server worked their shifts, greeted customers, and played music during small events. Each performance brought new reactions, new moments of connection, and new stories from patrons who were inspired or moved. The server found themselves thinking less about fear and more about the joy of sharing music. The cafe had become a place of discovery, not just for the customers, but for the server as well. Each day, the piano waited silently, inviting them to play, to express, and to connect. Through these performances, the server began to see a change in the cafe. Regulars stayed longer, new customers were drawn in, and the atmosphere shifted from ordinary to vibrant. People came to hear the music, but they also stayed for the sense of community it created. Conversations sparked over shared experiences, laughter filled the air, and even quiet moments felt richer with emotion. The server understood that their talent was not just about playing notes. It was about creating an experience that mattered to others. Even when the cafe was busy with orders and the usual chaos of service, there were small opportunities to share music. Sometimes it was a few notes played while taking a break, other times a soft melody while cleaning tables. The presence of the piano, and the server's willingness to play, transformed the space in subtle ways. Customers noticed, smiled, and felt a warmth that came from the genuine expression of someone sharing their gift. It was a reminder that extraordinary moments often happen in ordinary places, and that courage and authenticity could touch lives in unexpected ways. By the end of the week, the server felt a new sense of confidence. They had faced the fear of performing, connected with the audience, and discovered the impact of sharing their talent. The music had become a bridge between themselves and the people around them, creating moments of joy, surprise, and inspiration. The cafe, once just a place of routine and service, had become a space of possibility, where ordinary people could witness something extraordinary. The server knew that this was only the beginning, and that each day held the potential for new stories, new connections, and new experiences through the power of music. As the server closed the cafe that night, they looked at the piano one last time, fingers brushing lightly over the keys. It had become a companion, a partner in the unfolding story of courage and creativity. The notes played in the past few days echoed in their mind, a reminder that every person has hidden talents waiting to be shared. The audience had been amazed, the customers inspired, and the server transformed in ways they had never expected. In the quiet of the empty cafe, they smiled, knowing that the journey had just begun, and that the piano in the corner would continue to be a place where ordinary life met extraordinary moments. The cafe had grown quiet in the late afternoon, the soft golden light casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The server moved quickly, carrying plates and coffee, yet their mind was focused on the upcoming small gathering. There was a hint of anticipation in the air. Regulars were coming back, some asking if the server would play again, and a few new faces lingered near the door, curious after hearing about the previous performances. The server felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, knowing that today's performance would reach more people than ever before. They had practiced for years in private, but this was the first time they would perform for an audience that was not only larger but more expectant. As the first guests arrived, the server adjusted the piano bench and took a deep breath. Their hands rested on the keys, familiar yet different under the light of an audience. The first notes were soft, gentle, like a whisper in the cafe. The patrons leaned forward, surprised at the delicate sound, their conversations fading away. The server's fingers moved more confidently now, guided by practice, intuition, and emotion. Each note carried meaning, a story that could not be told in words. There was a power in that quiet performance, a presence that demanded attention even without shouting for it. A young woman near the front smiled as she listened, eyes bright, while an older man nodded subtly, clearly appreciating the skill and passion behind the music. A few children stopped moving, mesmerized by the sound, their small faces lit with wonder. The server noticed the reactions and felt a warm surge of courage. They continued, letting the music flow naturally, blending emotion with technical skill. The piano, once forgotten in the corner, became the center of attention, drawing people in with each chord. The server shifted from one piece to another, each with a different mood. Some melodies were lively and joyful, others soft and reflective. Patrons reacted accordingly, some tapping fingers on the tables, others simply closing their eyes to enjoy the moment. The atmosphere in the cafe changed completely. What had been ordinary, a place for coffee and conversation, became a shared experience of emotion and beauty. Every note played was a bridge between the performer and the audience, a connection that felt personal and intimate. Midway through the performance, the server began a piece that was more challenging, faster, and full of energy. Fingers flew across the keys, executing patterns that had been carefully practiced but never shown publicly. There were moments of intensity, pauses, and sudden shifts in tempo. The audience leaned forward, eyes wide, astonished by the skill and precision displayed. Whispers of admiration spread quietly through the crowd, and some people simply stared, unable to believe that the server, someone they had seen serving tables every day, could play with such mastery. One regular, who had been quietly sipping coffee at the back, could not hide their astonishment. They exchanged a look with a friend, both silently acknowledging that they had never expected to see this in a small cafe. A few others whispered, questioning whether the server had ever studied professionally, though there was something raw and genuine in the performance that suggested not. The music was not just technically skilled, it was alive, filled with emotion, and impossible to ignore. The server felt their heart racing, but it was no longer fear. It was exhilaration, a deep joy in sharing something so personal and seeing it touch others. Each chord, each melody, created small reactions. A tear in the corner of someone's eye, a smile, a subtle nod of appreciation. The audience was no longer just watching. They were part of the performance, connected to the music and to the performer in a way that transcended words. It was a rare kind of magic, the kind that could make ordinary moments unforgettable. As the piece reached its climax, the cafe seemed to hold its breath. The music surged, full of power and feeling, and then slowly eased into silence. The final note lingered, hanging in the air, and for a few moments, there was no sound but the soft rustle of movement. Then slowly applause began. One hand clapped, then another, until the room was filled with the sound of appreciation and amazement. The server looked up, a mixture of relief and joy washing over them. Faces in the crowd were glowing with surprise, delight, and admiration. It was a moment they would never forget. After the applause, the server continued with softer pieces, letting the audience recover and enjoy quieter melodies. Some customers whispered their appreciation. Others simply sat in awe, absorbing the music and the experience. The server felt a sense of humility, knowing that this was not just about showing skill, but about creating a connection, about giving something meaningful to others. Each note was a gift, and the reactions of the audience were the reward. During a brief pause, the owner came over quietly, smiling and placing a reassuring hand on the server's shoulder. "You're amazing," they said softly, not wanting to interrupt the flow but wanting to express pride. The server nodded, feeling grateful, but focused on the music again. The moment was not about recognition, it was about sharing something deeply personal, and the response of the audience made it all worthwhile. The evening continued with more pieces, each different in style and emotion. Patrons remained attentive, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes, all captivated. The server noticed small gestures, the way someone's foot tapped in rhythm, the gentle swaying of a listener, the quiet expressions of awe. Every response was unique, yet all contributed to the growing energy in the room. The cafe had become more than a place for coffee. It was now a space for shared experience, a small world where music brought strangers together. By the end of the performance, the audience was fully engaged, some standing to applaud, some wiping tears, others simply smiling with satisfaction. The server felt a profound sense of connection, realizing that their music had touched the hearts of people in ways they could not have imagined. The piano, once ignored in the corner, had become the center of this transformation, a symbol of courage, skill, and beauty. The server understood that moments like this were rare, and they felt grateful to be part of it. After the crowd dispersed, a few patrons lingered, approaching the server to share their thoughts. They spoke of being moved, inspired, and amazed. Some asked questions about the music, while others simply offered words of encouragement. The server listened, shy but pleased, understanding that their performance had created more than applause. It had created dialogue, connection, and shared emotion. The cafe, in that moment, felt alive with possibility, a place where ordinary people could witness something extraordinary. Later, when the cafe was quiet, the server sat alone at the piano, hands resting on the keys. They reflected on the evening, on the faces of the audience, and the feelings that had flowed through the room. There was a sense of fulfillment, a quiet joy that came from sharing a part of themselves that had been hidden for so long. The piano was no longer just an object in the corner. It was a partner in their journey, a vessel through which their emotions could be expressed and experienced by others. As they closed the cafe for the night, the server walked home slowly, thinking about the impact of the performance. It was not just the applause or recognition. It was the way the music had connected them with the audience, how it had brought moments of wonder, surprise, and inspiration into the lives of people they barely knew. The experience reinforced a belief they had always held quietly, that talent and courage, no matter how hidden, have the power to create extraordinary moments. The following days carried a new energy. More people came to the cafe, curious to see if they might witness the performance again. Regulars returned, some bringing friends to share in the experience. The server continued to work their shifts, serve coffee, and play music when asked, each performance deepening their confidence and connection with the audience. The cafe had transformed into a place where ordinary life intersected with extraordinary moments, and the server had become the bridge between the two. Through it all, the server remained humble, aware that their role as a server and musician was unique, and that each day brought new opportunities to create something meaningful. The piano, once silent and overlooked, continued to be a source of inspiration, a reminder that even the smallest and most ordinary spaces could hold the potential for magic. The audience's astonishment, their delight and emotional responses, reinforced a truth that the server carried forward. Courage, talent, and sincerity have the power to surprise, to inspire, and to connect people in ways that are unforgettable. As the week drew to a close, the server reflected on how much had changed. Their music had reached more people than ever before, and the cafe had become a center of shared experiences. Each performance was a reminder of the beauty that could be found in ordinary life, and the audience's reactions were proof that even simple acts of courage could leave a lasting impact. The server knew that the journey was far from over, and that the piano in the corner would continue to be a source of connection, inspiration, and discovery for everyone who came to witness it. The cafe had become a place of quiet excitement. Word of the server's piano performances was spreading fast. Patrons who had been there before brought friends, and strangers walked in, curious to see the pianist who had captured so many hearts. The server went about their usual duties, serving coffee, refilling pastries, and smiling politely, but the feeling of anticipation was constant. The old piano in the corner no longer seemed forgotten. It had become a symbol of unexpected talent and the magic that could appear in everyday life. The server adjusted the bench, sat down, and took a deep breath, ready for another performance. Today, there were more people than ever. The cafe was packed, voices quieting as the server began to play. The first notes drifted softly through the room, and heads turned toward the piano. Eyes widened in recognition and delight. Some customers had recorded short videos before, their phones held high, capturing the moment to share online. The server played with the same care and emotion as always, fingers moving smoothly, each note flowing naturally. The music filled the space, and for the first time, there was a sense that this performance could reach far beyond the walls of the cafe. By the time the server finished the first piece, there was soft applause, followed by murmurs of amazement. Several patrons whispered about how incredible it was that someone who served tables every day could play like this. A few stood to give longer applause, clearly moved. It was then that someone approached with a small camera, asking if they could film a portion of the performance to share online. The server nodded hesitantly, unsure what to expect, but allowed it. Little did they know, this simple act would change everything. The video was posted later that afternoon, and almost immediately, comments and shares began to appear. People were amazed at the skill, and viewers expressed their astonishment that the pianist had been a server. Messages flooded in from all over, sharing encouragement, praise, and curiosity. The server was surprised by the attention. Until now, their music had been mostly private, shared only with the audience in the cafe. Suddenly, the world beyond the cafe doors knew about it. The feeling was both thrilling and overwhelming. It was a new kind of stage, one the server had never imagined. News outlets soon picked up the story. Local journalists came to the cafe to film and interview the server, fascinated by the juxtaposition of a quiet server playing incredible music in a small, ordinary cafe. The server remained humble, speaking softly, emphasizing that it was not about recognition but about sharing something meaningful. Yet, it was impossible to ignore the effect this had on daily life. The cafe became busier than ever, with people arriving early, hoping to witness a live performance. The server continued to play during these events, each performance building confidence and drawing more attention. With each note, they shared emotion, telling stories through music instead of words. The audience was captivated, some moved to tears, others nodding in silent admiration. The cafe had become more than a place for coffee. It was a space where music could inspire, connect, and bring joy to ordinary lives. Regulars and newcomers alike were touched by the presence of talent in such an unexpected form. As the popularity grew, invitations came in. People suggested small community events, local art shows, and even charity performances. The server was cautious, not wanting to leave the cafe too often, but the idea of sharing music with a wider audience was tempting. Each invitation brought a mix of excitement and nervousness, yet the thought of making people happy with music outweighed the fear. Every opportunity was a chance to show that talent could come from anyone, anywhere. Meanwhile, the cafe staff and owner noticed the positive change. The atmosphere had become lighter, more vibrant, and the patrons' energy was infectious. Even those who came just for coffee stayed longer, listening to the music, enjoying the connection. The server realized that their performances had created a ripple effect, transforming the ordinary routines of daily life into moments of inspiration. They felt proud, but also deeply responsible, knowing that each performance was more than just entertainment. It was a gift to those who experienced it. The server began to receive letters and messages from people touched by the music. Some shared personal stories of struggle, expressing how the melodies brought comfort or hope. Others admitted that the performance had reminded them to pursue their own hidden talents. The server was moved, realizing that the music had a profound impact beyond the cafe walls. It was a reminder that sharing one's gift, no matter how ordinary it might seem in daily life, could create extraordinary connections. The cafe soon became known as a local hub for music and community. Events were scheduled regularly, drawing crowds eager to hear the server play. Each performance was a mix of anticipation and excitement, a chance for the audience to witness the extraordinary. The server found balance, managing their responsibilities at the cafe while embracing the growing opportunities. With every note, they felt the power of music to reach hearts, to inspire, and to transform ordinary spaces into places of wonder. Despite the growing recognition, the server remained grounded. They continued to serve coffee, take orders, and engage with patrons as before, knowing that humility and sincerity were key. The fame brought attention, yes, but the real reward was the connection with people, the smiles, the tears, and the quiet moments of shared emotion. Every performance was a dialogue, a chance to speak through music rather than words, and the audience responded with openness and gratitude. Occasionally, the server reflected on the journey from practicing in private to performing for audiences both in person and online. They remembered the early days, when the piano sat unused in the corner, and the idea of playing for anyone seemed impossible. Now, the server saw how far courage and persistence could take a person. Each performance reinforced the lesson that hidden talents, once shared, could create ripples that reach far beyond what one might imagine. With growing confidence, the server began experimenting with new pieces, adding personal touches, and creating arrangements that reflected emotion and mood. Patrons were drawn to the music, eager to hear something new, and the server enjoyed the challenge of connecting with the audience in different ways. Every note was carefully considered, each pause intentional, allowing the music to breathe and the audience to experience it fully. The cafe was alive with energy, a combination of anticipation, admiration, and heartfelt appreciation. The recognition also brought invitations for interviews and features in local publications. The server approached each with humility, emphasizing the joy of sharing music rather than seeking fame. People were fascinated by the story, a humble server whose hidden talent had touched so many. Yet the server never let the attention change who they were. They remained approachable, kind, and focused on the joy of creating music for others, whether in the cafe or at special events. Through this time, the server noticed the subtle impact on the community. Regulars and newcomers alike began to talk about the importance of pursuing passions and expressing hidden talents. Some were inspired to pick up instruments or explore hobbies long forgotten. The cafe became a symbol of possibility, proof that ordinary people could create extraordinary experiences. The server felt a quiet pride, knowing that their music had sparked something larger than themselves, touching lives in ways that went beyond simple performance. As weeks passed, the story continued to grow. Videos of the performances were shared widely, comments of encouragement poured in, and people continued to visit the cafe from surrounding areas. Yet for the server, the most meaningful moments were always the quiet, personal connections. The glance of awe, the gentle smile, the subtle nod of appreciation. These small gestures reminded them that music, at its core, was about human connection, shared emotion, and the joy of expression. Even with all the attention, the server maintained a balance. The cafe remained their home base, a place where they could serve, interact, and share music in a comfortable environment. The piano, once a forgotten object in the corner, had become central to this new chapter. It was no longer just an instrument. It was a tool for connection, inspiration, and personal fulfillment. Each performance reinforced the idea that courage and talent, when combined, could create moments of magic in everyday life. By the end of this chapter in the server's journey, the cafe had transformed into a place of possibility and inspiration. Patrons came not just for coffee, but to witness something extraordinary in someone they knew and saw every day. The server had shown that hidden talent, when shared, could create a ripple effect, inspiring others, bringing joy, and touching lives. They had become a symbol of hope, courage, and the power of music to connect hearts. And in the quiet moments, when the cafe was empty and the lights dimmed, the server would sit at the piano, fingers brushing over the keys, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with discovery, connection, and the endless potential of sharing one's gift with the world. The cafe had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Patrons now came not just for the coffee and pastries, but to witness the server at the piano, a quiet but powerful presence that drew people from all over. The server moved with confidence now, both in serving and performing, balancing the ordinary tasks of the cafe with the extraordinary moments they created at the piano. It was no longer just about hiding a talent or testing it on a small audience. It had become a way to connect with others, to bring joy, and to inspire. Each day began with the same routine: setting up tables, brewing coffee, and preparing the cafe for visitors. But now, there was a sense of anticipation, a quiet energy that permeated the room. Customers arrived early, eager for a seat near the piano, and new faces appeared daily, drawn by the stories and videos shared online. The server moved seamlessly between their duties and the music. Hands that could serve coffee with care could also create melodies that captured hearts. There was a harmony between the ordinary and the extraordinary, a balance that made every day meaningful. When the first notes played, the room transformed instantly. The chatter softened, and all attention turned to the piano. The server's fingers moved across the keys with skill and emotion, telling stories through the music that words could never express. Patrons leaned forward, eyes shining, some with tears, others with quiet smiles. It was a shared experience, intimate yet communal, creating a sense of connection that went beyond the usual interactions of the cafe. Each piece played added to the growing narrative of courage, talent, and human emotion that had started quietly and now reached far and wide. The performances continued to gain attention. Videos shared online went viral, attracting comments from people all over the world. Messages poured in from viewers who were touched by the music, sharing their own stories of struggle, hope, and inspiration. Some wrote about feeling encouraged to pursue dreams they had put aside. Others spoke of discovering hidden talents in themselves. The server was moved by these responses, realizing that their music had a reach far beyond the cafe walls. It was proof that even simple acts of courage could resonate with people in profound ways. Despite the attention, the server remained grounded. They knew that the heart of the journey was not fame but connection. Each performance, whether in a packed cafe or during a quiet moment, was about sharing a part of themselves. The audience responded not just to skill, but to sincerity, passion, and authenticity. People remembered the experience, not for the applause or recognition, but for the emotions stirred, the joy and wonder created, and the reminder that extraordinary moments could exist in ordinary places. The server began to receive invitations to perform in small community events, local charity gatherings, and cultural celebrations. Each invitation brought a mix of excitement and nerves, but the decision to accept always rested on the desire to bring joy through music. They found a rhythm, performing occasionally outside the cafe while maintaining the daily responsibilities that grounded them. Each new experience was an opportunity to share talent, inspire others, and create lasting memories. The response from audiences was overwhelmingly positive, reinforcing the power of courage and authenticity. Back at the cafe, the transformation was visible. Regulars and newcomers alike began engaging in small acts of appreciation, leaving notes, small gifts, or simply lingering longer to enjoy the music. Conversations often turned to the topic of pursuing hidden talents and embracing creativity. The cafe became a place of community and inspiration, a space where people could witness the magic that ordinary life could hold when courage and passion met opportunity. The piano, once silent and overlooked, was now central to the story, a symbol of potential realized and shared. Through all of this, the server found moments of reflection. Sitting at the piano after the cafe had quieted down, they thought about the journey. From private practice, hidden from view, to performing in front of curious patrons, to the recognition that reached across the city and beyond. There was gratitude, a deep understanding of how small steps, courage, and dedication could create ripple effects that touched many lives. It was a humbling realization, a reminder that every act of sharing talent, no matter how small, could inspire and connect. The server also saw the effect on the people around them. Some patrons were inspired to pursue their own hobbies, others found courage to step into new experiences, and a few simply left with a renewed sense of wonder. Conversations sparked, friendships formed, and the cafe became a hub of positive energy. The impact was subtle, yet meaningful, showing that the influence of courage and talent could extend beyond the music itself. The server understood that the journey was about more than performance. It was about creating moments of shared humanity. As the weeks passed, the server continued to perform, balancing daily work with occasional events outside the cafe. Each performance built confidence, skill, and emotional connection. Audiences were captivated by the music, yet even more by the story, the ordinary person revealing extraordinary talent. Patrons expressed admiration and gratitude, some tearful, some smiling broadly, all touched in unique ways. The cafe became a place where people experienced joy, inspiration, and the reminder that magic could exist in everyday life. One evening, after the cafe had closed and the lights dimmed, the server sat alone at the piano. Fingers brushed across the keys, softly playing a familiar melody. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft echo of the music. Memories of the journey filled the space. The nervous first performance, the hesitant audience, the growing confidence, and the wide-reaching impact of sharing talent. There was a sense of completion, yet also of continuation, knowing that this story was ongoing, evolving with each performance and interaction. The server reflected on the lessons learned. Courage is essential, talent thrives when shared, and sincerity creates connections that last. They understood that ordinary life could hold extraordinary moments when passion and bravery intersect. Each note played was a message, a gift, and a bridge between themselves and the audience. Even simple performances could inspire, comfort, and encourage, showing that the human spirit thrives on shared experience and emotion. As the cafe prepared for another day, the server felt a quiet confidence. They knew that the piano in the corner would continue to be a source of inspiration, a space where ordinary tasks and extraordinary moments converged. Patrons would continue to arrive, eager for music, for connection, and for the sense of wonder that came from witnessing talent that seemed hidden in plain sight. The server had become a symbol of hope and courage, showing that sharing one's gifts could impact lives in ways that were unexpected yet profound. The story of the server and the piano was no longer just a local tale. It was a reminder to everyone that hidden talents exist in everyday people, waiting to be shared. The journey had started quietly, with simple practice in private, but it had grown into something much larger. A movement of inspiration, a ripple of courage, and a celebration of human creativity. Each performance was a continuation, a chapter in a story of ordinary life meeting extraordinary potential. In the quiet moments, the server would sit and play, thinking of the faces in the audience, the emotions stirred, and the impact of the music. It was a reminder that talent, when shared sincerely, could touch hearts, inspire action, and create moments that mattered. The cafe had become more than a place to eat or drink. It was a space of community, reflection, and human connection, where music bridged the gap between the ordinary and the extraordinary. And so, the journey continued. The server balanced work and music, serving coffee, and playing melodies that told stories. Each day was filled with opportunity, each performance a chance to inspire, and each audience a reminder of the power of courage, talent, and sincerity. The piano in the corner, once overlooked, had become the centerpiece of transformation, not just for the server but for everyone who experienced its music. The story was a testament to the extraordinary potential hidden in ordinary life, and the quiet power of sharing one's gift with the world. In every note, there was joy, hope, and connection. Proof that even the simplest acts can leave a lasting mark on hearts and minds.